The sun was already high when Clara stepped into the car dealership, clutching a folder of papers and a small envelope of food stamps. Her shoes were worn, her coat a little faded, but her eyes carried something no amount of money could buy: quiet dignity. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there for one reason only: to buy a used car so she could get to her new job on time. After years of struggling, she finally had a chance to rebuild her life. But as she walked in, the laughter behind the glossy counter told her that not everyone believed she belonged there. "Ma'am, this isn't a charity," one of the salesmen sneered, exchanging smirks with his co-workers. They didn't even bother lowering their voices. Another man leaned against a shiny black sedan and said loudly, "You can't pay for a car with food stamps, sweetheart." The others chuckled, their laughter echoing through the showroom like a cruel reminder of how the world sees those who have less. Clara's cheeks flushed red, but she forced herself to smile. She wasn't ashamed, she had come too far to be. Still, the humiliation stung. Every step she took around that polished floor felt heavier. She tried to explain that she had part of the payment saved and that her husband would cover the rest. But the more she spoke, the more they mocked her. One of the younger men even whispered, "Yeah, sure. Your husband must be the president," earning another round of laughter. Clara swallowed hard and lowered her eyes. She knew they wouldn't understand, they never do. Outside, her husband's black SUV was parked a few streets away. He had told her he'd join her soon, but Clara wanted to handle this herself. She never liked to rely on his name, never wanted people to treat her differently because of who he was. To them he was a billionaire, but to her he was simply Ethan, the man who loved her when she had nothing, who saw her heart before her broken past. But right now, he had no idea that the woman he adored was being ridiculed for being poor again. One of the dealers took her papers, looked them over carelessly, and then tossed them back onto the counter. "Come back when you can actually afford something," he said. "Or better yet, there's a used bike shop down the road." The others burst out laughing again. Clara turned away, her eyes glistening. She had faced hardship before: hunger, nights without shelter, days when all she could do was pray for one kind word, but somehow this hurt more. Just as she was about to leave, her phone buzzed. A simple text lit up the screen. "I'm here. Did you find something you like?" Her heart raced as she looked toward the entrance. Through the glass doors, a tall man in a tailored suit was stepping out of a sleek car. The laughter inside suddenly died. The air shifted. And in that moment, none of them knew, the woman they just mocked was married to the man who owned half the dealership chain. Clara wiped her tears and turned back toward the counter. Her husband had just entered the room, his eyes finding hers, calm, protective, and filled with something the salesmen were about to learn the meaning of: quiet power. Ethan Blake wasn't the kind of man who needed to announce his presence. When he entered the dealership, the room seemed to still on its own. His quiet confidence carried more weight than any title or amount of money ever could. The salesmen, who just moments ago were laughing at Clara, straightened their ties and forced smiles. None of them recognized him yet, but something about his demeanor made them uneasy, like they suddenly realized they might have made a mistake. Clara quickly wiped her eyes, hoping he wouldn't notice. But Ethan did. He always noticed. He walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate, the kind that made people step aside without being asked. "Did you find the car you wanted, love?" he asked softly, his tone warm enough to melt her embarrassment but firm enough to let everyone know she wasn't alone. Before she could answer, one of the salesmen jumped in. "Sir, we were just helping your wife look at a few models," he said, his voice a mix of charm and nervousness. Ethan glanced at him briefly, not with anger, but with a calm curiosity that made the man fidget. "Helping?" Ethan asked quietly. "Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like help." The man laughed awkwardly. "Oh no sir, just a little misunderstanding. We didn't know she..." He stopped himself. Didn't know she what? That she wasn't someone to be dismissed. That she wasn't poor enough to mock. The words hung in the air, unfinished and heavy. Ethan didn't respond right away. He turned to Clara, who stood silently beside him, her hands still trembling slightly. She didn't want him to make a scene. She wasn't the kind of woman who needed revenge or public apology. She only wanted to be treated like a person, with respect. But she also knew Ethan too well. He wasn't the kind to let cruelty go unnoticed. As the awkward silence stretched, the other customers began to sense something was happening. A few phones discreetly came out recording. Ethan noticed but ignored them. His focus remained on the woman who had stood tall through years of struggle, and on the men who thought they could break her spirit with a few cheap laughs. The senior manager finally hurried over, adjusting his expensive watch and pretending to smile. "Mr. Blake," he said quickly, recognizing him now. "What a surprise. If we'd known you were coming." Ethan's expression didn't change. "You wouldn't have treated her like this." He finished the sentence for him. The manager swallowed hard, nodding. Clara placed a hand on her husband's arm. "Ethan, please," she whispered. "It's fine." But he looked at her gently and said, "No, Clara. It's not fine when kindness is treated like weakness." The words echoed across the glossy showroom. The laughter had stopped completely now. Every salesman who had mocked her earlier stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact. The tension in the room was thick, the kind that made even the ticking clock on the wall sound too loud. Then Ethan took a slow step forward, his tone still calm but cutting through the silence like a blade. "Tell me," he said to the salesman who had tossed Clara's papers, "is this how you treat all your customers? Or just the ones you think can't afford your cars?" The man opened his mouth, but no words came out. Clara felt her heart race, part fear, part pride. She didn't know what Ethan would do next, but she knew this wasn't over. Outside, through the glass, a few people had started to gather, watching the scene unfold. The dealership lights reflected off the windows, making everything inside look like a stage. And Clara, the woman they had mocked, was now standing at the center of it. Ethan's voice dropped lower. "You see, gentlemen," he said, looking around the room, "money doesn't make you powerful. How you treat people does." The staff exchanged uneasy glances. None dared to speak. Clara's fingers tightened around Ethan's sleeve. She could feel the storm building, the one that would soon change everything, not just for her but for everyone in that room. The air in the dealership had turned heavy. No one dared to move. The same men who had laughed minutes ago now stood frozen, their fake smiles replaced by uneasy silence. Ethan didn't raise his voice, but every word carried weight. Clara wanted to tell him to let it go, but deep down she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been humiliated for being poor, every mother or father who had been made to feel small because they couldn't flash a gold card or drive a luxury car. Ethan walked slowly around the cars, his eyes scanning the shiny metal reflections that hid so much arrogance beneath. "You know," he said softly, "I started from nothing once. Slept in my car for 3 months when no one believed in me. I met Clara when I had less than she did. But she never judged me." He turned his gaze toward the man who had mocked her first. "Can any of you say the same?" The salesman shifted uncomfortably, his confidence crumbling. A few customers whispered among themselves. One woman with her little boy tugged his sleeve and said quietly, "That's him, Ethan Blake, the billionaire who owns Horizon Motors." The rumor spread fast like fire. The employees who had looked down on Clara now realized they had mocked the wife of their company's owner. The color drained from their faces. But Ethan didn't look angry. His calm was more unnerving than any outburst could have been. Clara, standing close behind him, felt torn between admiration and anxiety. She didn't like attention. She had spent most of her life trying to blend in, not stand out. She had grown up in foster homes, working small jobs, learning to survive without asking for help. Even after marrying Ethan, she refused to live lavishly. She still cooked her own meals, helped at community shelters, and tried to give people the same kindness she once prayed for. That was what made her different, and what drew Ethan to her in the first place. The senior manager cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Blake, please understand. This is all a misunderstanding. My team didn't know. Didn't know she was my wife. Ethan interrupted gently. So if she weren't, you'd treat her like this anyway? The question hung in the air, cold and sharp. The manager's voice failed him. He looked down, searching for an excuse that didn't exist. Outside, more people had stopped to watch through the glass. Some recorded, others just stood there, curious about the quiet billionaire defending a woman everyone had judged too quickly. But inside, for Clara, it felt like the world was closing in. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and her heart pounded as flashes from phones reflected off the polished cars. Ethan turned back to her, his expression softening for the first time since he walked in. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded, but her eyes said otherwise. "I just wanted to buy something small," she whispered. "Something I could call mine." He smiled sadly. "You already have everything that matters," he said, brushing her hand lightly. But the peace between them was short-lived. From the back office, another voice broke the silence, cold and dismissive. "This is getting ridiculous," said a tall man in a gray suit, stepping forward. "Mr. Blake or not, we have rules here. We don't accept certain types of payments." His tone made it clear he wasn't just talking about money. Ethan turned his head slowly, studying the man's face. "And what type would that be?" he asked. The man crossed his arms. "Let's just say, we prefer a certain kind of customer." Gasps rippled through the room. The words hit Clara like a slap. She could feel every eye turn toward her again, judging, waiting. Ethan's calm expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. Clara could see it, the side of him that few people ever witnessed. The tension grew thick again, pressing against every corner of the room. Nobody dared to speak. Outside, a few more people had gathered, sensing something big was unfolding inside the dealership. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She could tell that whatever Ethan was about to say next would change everything, not just for the people in that showroom, but for how they would remember this day forever. For a long moment no one spoke. The air in the dealership was thick with silence, the kind that makes even breathing feel too loud. Clara's eyes darted between her husband and the tall man in the gray suit, the one who had just crossed a line that couldn't be taken back. The arrogance in his voice had drained the room of any warmth. Ethan didn't move, but something in his stillness felt dangerous. Not in a physical way, but in a way that made people realize they'd underestimated the wrong man. The tall man smirked, trying to hold on to control. "You might own a few branches, Mr. Blake," he said, straightening his jacket, "but this one runs on my rules. I don't care who she is. People who pay with stamps and scraps don't belong here." His words echoed against the glass walls, sharp enough to make even his co-workers flinch. Clara felt her throat tighten. She could handle insults, she'd been through worse, but hearing someone speak that way with her husband standing right there, it was unbearable. She tried to whisper, "Ethan, please, let's just leave." But Ethan didn't hear her. Or maybe he did, and that was exactly why he stayed. The manager shifted nervously, whispering to another employee, "That's Daniel Ward. He's been running this branch for 10 years. Thinks he owns the place." The whisper wasn't quiet enough. Ethan heard it. He slowly turned toward Daniel, his tone still calm but edged with quiet power. "So you're the one responsible for how this place treats people?" Daniel gave a half-laugh. "I'm responsible for keeping standards," he said, chin raised. "This isn't a supermarket, Mr. Blake. We sell luxury here." "Luxury?" Ethan repeated softly, stepping closer. "And what exactly makes something luxurious? The leather seats? The shiny floors? Or the way you make people feel small just so you can feel big?" Daniel's smirk faltered, but only slightly. "I don't make the rules of life, Mr. Blake. Some people just don't belong in certain places. It's business." "Business?" Ethan's tone dropped lower. "Then you should know that the heart of business is people, not pride." A few customers began to clap quietly, but Ethan raised a hand to stop them. He wasn't there to perform. He was there to teach a lesson, one they'd never forget. Clara watched him with mixed emotions, part fear, part awe. She could feel the pressure in the air building, every second more intense than the last. Daniel took a step back, realizing for the first time that the crowd outside had doubled. Phones were recording through the glass. Employees stood frozen in the corners. The laughter and arrogance that once filled the space had turned into complete silence and shame. Ethan pulled out his phone and made a brief call. "Yes," he said calmly. "Send the documents to this branch. Now." His words sent murmurs through the room. Daniel's confident stance began to crumble. "What documents?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "You'll see soon," Ethan said. "And when you do, you'll understand what real ownership means." Clara placed her hand on Ethan's arm again, her voice trembling. "Ethan, don't do this for me. I just wanted to be treated like everyone else." He turned to her, his eyes softening for a moment. "That's exactly why I'm doing it," he said quietly. Moments later, a sleek car pulled up outside. A young assistant stepped out with a folder in hand and hurried inside. The tension was unbearable now. Everyone in the room, staff, customers, even those watching from the street, waited to see what would happen next. Daniel tried to laugh it off, but the sound was thin, nervous. Ethan took the folder, glanced through it, and then slowly looked up. His gaze locked on Daniel. "You've been running this branch for 10 years, he said evenly. "But as of today..." He paused deliberately, letting the silence stretch until it felt like the air might shatter. Clara's heart pounded. Daniel's face went pale. The staff leaned forward, eyes wide. The crowd outside pressed closer to the glass, phones raised. The moment hung between them, fragile, electric, and impossible to escape. Ethan took a slow breath. His next words balanced on the edge of the moment, the calm before the storm. Everything was about to change, but no one yet knew how far it would go or what the price of pride would be. Ethan's voice lingered in the tense silence, every word hanging in the air like a warning. Just as he was about to reveal what was in the folder, the heavy glass doors of the dealership swung open again. Everyone turned. A woman in a sharp navy suit walked in, her heels clicking against the tile floor. Her presence carried the same quiet authority as Ethan's, confident, calm, but impossible to ignore. The staff straightened instantly, whispering her name. "That's Laura Miles," someone muttered. "Regional Director." Clara blinked, confused. She had never met her before, but the way Laura looked at Ethan made her uneasy, like there was more between them than just business. Laura's eyes softened when they met his, but then flickered toward Clara, and the warmth faded. "Mr. Blake," she said smoothly, "I came as soon as I heard what was happening." Daniel quickly seized the moment, stepping forward. "Ms. Miles, thank God you're here," he said, forcing a nervous laugh. "This has all gotten out of hand. Mr. Blake's wife caused a misunderstanding, and now..." "Enough," Laura interrupted sharply. "I already reviewed the footage." Her gaze turned toward Ethan. "But I need to speak to you privately." The crowd murmured again. Clara's stomach tightened. She could sense that something wasn't right. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Fine," he said quietly. "Let's talk." Laura led him toward one of the glass offices at the side of the showroom. Clara watched as the door closed behind them, the sound of their muffled voices faint but tense. The employees stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Daniel smirked slightly, his confidence returning now that someone else had stepped in. "See," he muttered under his breath. "Even billionaires have to answer to someone." Clara heard him but didn't respond. Her mind was spinning. Why did this woman seem so familiar with Ethan? And why did she seem defensive? She could only catch glimpses through the glass. Laura gesturing firmly, Ethan standing tall, his expression unreadable. Minutes passed, but each one felt like an hour. Finally the office door opened. Laura stepped out first, her face unreadable, followed by Ethan, who looked calm but distant. The tension in the room thickened. I've just confirmed something, Laura said clearly, addressing everyone. As of this morning, the company's board made an internal change. Mr. Blake's ownership over the Horizon branches is currently under review pending investigation. Gasps filled the room. Daniel's eyebrows shot up, a smile creeping back onto his face. Investigation, he repeated, feigning surprise. Oh, how interesting. Ethan didn't flinch, but Clara saw the way his jaw tightened. Laura continued. Until this matter is settled, operational authority is temporarily in my hands. Her tone was crisp, professional, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes when she looked at Ethan. Something personal. Clara's heart sank. She could tell that whatever was happening went far deeper than this public humiliation. Ethan turned to her briefly, offering a reassuring glance, but the calm in his eyes only made her more anxious. He wasn't surprised, as if he had known this was coming. Daniel, seizing the opportunity, stepped forward smugly. So that means I report to you now, Ms. Miles. Laura nodded. For the time being. Then, he said, his voice laced with satisfaction, I suppose we should get back to business. And that includes deciding which customers belong here and which don't. The words were meant to provoke, and they did. Clara's pulse quickened. She could feel the crowd outside pressing closer to the glass again. Phones still recording. Ethan said nothing. His silence somehow louder than any outburst could have been. Laura turned sharply toward Daniel. You'll do no such thing, she snapped. This situation is already a mess. You're on thin ice. But even as she spoke, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Laura's sudden arrival, and to this so-called investigation. Ethan wasn't a man who lost control of his business easily. If something was being reviewed, it was because he allowed it. Her thoughts were interrupted when Ethan turned back to her. His tone calm but laced with warning. Clara, he said softly, whatever happens next, don't leave. The words sent a chill through her. The employees exchanged uneasy glances. The phones kept recording. And in that tense silence, as Laura and Daniel locked eyes with Ethan, everyone in the dealership realized. The real power struggle was only beginning. The tension in the dealership felt electric. Every person inside could sense that something huge was about to unfold. Clara stood near the counter, clutching her hands tightly as Ethan stepped forward, calm but unreadable. Laura and Daniel stood side by side, one hiding a smirk, the other pretending to be in control, but everyone could feel that neither of them really understood what was coming. Ethan looked at Laura first. So, he said evenly, the board decided to review my ownership? Interesting timing. Right when I show up to expose what's been happening inside my own company. Laura's expression stayed professional, but there was a flicker of nervousness in her eyes. The review was scheduled weeks ago, she replied. You know that, Ethan. Do I? He said quietly, taking another step closer. Because according to my own records, that meeting never existed. He turned toward the assistant who had handed him the folder earlier. James, you still have that file. James nodded and quickly stepped forward, passing Ethan a second sealed envelope. Ethan opened it slowly, his movements deliberate, keeping every pair of eyes locked on him. You see, he began, his tone calm but cutting, before I came here today, I had my legal team audit this branch, and every branch under Horizon Motors. I wanted to know why customer complaints about discrimination and unethical practices had tripled this quarter. Daniel's confident smile began to fade. Laura's face turned pale. Ethan continued. Turns out, this particular branch has been under investigation for months, not by the board but by me. And Daniel, he said, locking eyes with him, your name appears on every single internal report. The room erupted in whispers. Daniel stammered. That's ridiculous. You can't just. Oh, I can, Ethan interrupted softly. Because while you were busy humiliating customers like my wife, you were also manipulating sales reports and pocketing bonus commissions meant for employees you fired. Gasps filled the air. Laura's hand trembled slightly, and Clara watched her closely, noticing how her gaze avoided Ethan's. Something else was hidden there. Guilt or fear. Ethan turned to her next. "And you, Laura," he said calmly. "You approved every falsified report he sent. Which means you didn't come here to fix a problem. You came to cover it up." Laura's composure cracked. "Ethan, please," she said under her breath. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he said. "You thought the ownership transfer would go through before I found out. But you see," he paused, his eyes meeting Clara's for just a moment, his voice softening before hardening again. "You underestimated who I trust most." He motioned to his assistant, who handed Clara a pen and another envelope. "Clara," Ethan said gently, "sign this please." Clara hesitated, her heart racing. "What is it?" "It's the document making you the co-owner of Horizon Motors," he said. "It was filed yesterday." The room fell silent. Laura froze. Daniel's mouth fell open. Clara's hands shook as she signed, still not fully understanding, until Ethan spoke again, this time with quiet finality. "From this moment, she has the authority to decide what happens here." All eyes turned to Clara. She looked at the same men who had mocked her hours earlier, now pale and speechless. She took a slow breath, her voice trembling but strong. "Then my first decision," she said softly, "is to make sure no one who walks through these doors is ever treated the way I was today." Applause broke out from the customers. The sales staff stood straighter, relief and shame mixing in their faces. Daniel tried to speak, but Laura grabbed his arm, whispering sharply, "It's over." Ethan took Clara's hand, pride shining in his eyes. "You see," he whispered, "kindness wins, even when the world doesn't believe it can." But just as they began to leave, a notification buzzed on Ethan's phone. He glanced at it, his calm expression faltering for the first time. Clara noticed instantly. "What is it?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, then back toward Laura, whose face had gone pale again. "It's a message from the board," he said slowly. "Apparently, the investigation wasn't just about Daniel or Laura." He turned the screen toward her. "It was about me." Clara's breath caught. The screen showed a single line. "Ownership of Horizon Motors is being transferred to the new majority shareholder, Clara Blake." The entire room froze again. Clara stared at the phone in disbelief. Ethan just smiled faintly and whispered, "Looks like you were always meant to own it, love." The crowd erupted once more, this time not in shock, but in awe. The woman they once mocked now stood as the rightful owner, the one who had turned humiliation into triumph. But as the cameras flashed and people cheered, Clara's eyes met Ethan's, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this twist, however sweet, was only the beginning of something far bigger. The crowd outside the courtroom erupted in cheers as the verdict was announced. Maya was cleared of all false accusations, and her husband, Ethan, was finally seen for who he truly was, a man who had chosen power and greed over love and loyalty. The reporters swarmed around Maya, but instead of gloating or celebrating her victory, she simply smiled humbly and said, "Truth doesn't need to shout, it just waits for the right moment to be heard." Her voice carried calm strength, a quiet reminder that dignity often speaks louder than revenge. Ethan, standing at the courthouse steps, watched her walk away with tears in his eyes. The reality of what he had lost began to sink in. Not the wealth, not the name, but the woman who once believed in him when no one else did. He tried to call out to her, but Maya didn't turn back. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be truly alone. The empire he built now felt empty, echoing with guilt and regret. The woman he had once underestimated had walked away stronger than ever, not through revenge but through grace. Weeks passed, and the city slowly moved on from the scandal. Maya returned to her small art studio, the same one where her dreams had begun before marriage had changed her world. She painted every day, each stroke a reflection of pain, healing, and hope. Her work began to gain recognition, and soon, galleries started calling her the woman who painted truth. Yet, fame didn't matter much to her anymore. She had found something deeper: peace. One afternoon, as she was closing up the studio, she heard a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, holding a small worn-out box. He looked older, defeated but honest. "I know I can't undo what I did," he said quietly, handing her the box. Inside it was the same locket she used to wear, the one he had broken years ago during an argument. He had repaired it piece by piece. "This is not a gift," he continued. "It's a reminder of what I broke and what I can never fix again." Maya looked at the locket for a long moment, then gently closed the box. "You can't fix the past, Ethan," she said softly, "but you can choose to be better in the future. Just not with me." There was no anger in her tone, only acceptance. She wished him well and walked back inside, leaving him standing in the golden glow of the sunset. That was her closure, quiet and powerful. Months later, Maya's story went viral, not as a tale of betrayal, but as one of courage, healing and forgiveness. Her words inspired thousands. Sometimes the ones who hurt you the most are the ones who teach you how strong you truly are. She had turned her pain into art, her heartbreak into purpose. As the final scene faded, Maya stood by her window, watching the city lights shimmer below. She took a deep breath, smiling softly. The past no longer haunted her. She wasn't the woman who was kicked when she was down. She was the woman who rose despite it. The gentle music of her new life filled the air, and for the first time in years, her heart felt free. And just like that, her story came full circle, not with revenge or wealth, but with quiet triumph. Because sometimes the most powerful victories are the ones won in silence.